Hello, my name is Tia, also known as Costume Fiend, because I'm both evil and excessively fond of dressing up. I'm just gonna throw in I have a Ko-fi account plug now because it's short and I want to get in the habit of it. There's never any pressure to tip me because this is currently a hobby for me and just an outlet to be geeky, but having money is kind of a life necessity whether I like it or not, so it never hurts to ask, I suppose. But moving on, in light of the events that closed out 2024, I ended up thinking about the TV show Leverage because one of the main characters, Nate Ford, had some personal beef with an insurance company. In particular, the company he worked for that didn't approve of treatment that could have potentially saved his son's life. Leverage may have some flaws, but at its core, I think it's incredibly rewatchable to me because unfortunately, what's said in its opening theme monologue still rings true. The rich and powerful take what they want. The show's initial run lasted 5 seasons, and they had plenty of material to choose from when it came to scummy corporations and billionaires to use as the basis for their episodes. I haven't yet watched the reboot, but it's not really surprising that the show could make a comeback. Because I've rewatched it so often, I wasn't really sure where I'd even want to start or what I'd want to gush over. But I think that I realized that the third season is probably my favorite. It is a very close race though, because I'm actually on season 4 now and I'm really loving that one too. But I figured I could get into why I like season 3 just as a grounder. Before I do, I'll give a quick overview slash rundown of the series and its characters in case you haven't seen it or it's just been a while. I mentioned one of the main characters already, Nate Ford, who acted as the team's leader slash mastermind. He's the only one on the team that started off as in quotes, regular civilian, for lack of a better phrase. As I said, he also worked in insurance, which is why, as of the pilot, he'd at least heard of all the other main characters and had a direct encounter or two with the team's grifter, Sophie Devereaux. We later learn that Sophie isn't her real name, which actually comes up in the third season, but I'll be calling her Sophie for the purposes of this video. I feel like she's credited as Sophie pretty much everywhere. She's an excellent liar and has the ability to read people, but she is almost ironically a terrible actress because, in some ways, acting requires you to be honest. Next, we have Elliot Spencer, who used to work for the US government before working independently as a hitter. This is relevant throughout the show, but in season 3, it goes into it a bit more and what that means for his character and why he does what he does currently. And then we have Parker, our thief, and the character who probably had the most unconventional childhood. As a result, she'd probably been in the crime game the longest. And finally, we end with Alec Hardison, the youngest member of the group and its hacker. The pilot brings these 5 people together because an aerospace CEO, a man named Victor Dubenich, hires Elliot, Parker, and Hardison to steal something for him that he claims was his to begin with. He then hires Nate, who at this point had quit his insurance job, to be the good man meant to keep the criminals on task and to keep them honest. He convinces Nate to take the job because it'd be a way to stick it to his former employer. However, it's revealed that the 4 were tricked into stealing plans that weren't Mr. Dubenich in the first place, and he sets them up to be killed. Naturally, this backfires and the crew all want revenge, so Nate gets the idea to hire Sophie to help them do just that, because like I said already, he knew her since her grifting put her in Nate's orbit. Then after taking down their first mark together, in spite of the fact that they all worked alone previously, they decide to team up and let Nate pick the job since he was the token good guy. Now, on top of the fact that I enjoy a good heist, and almost every episode of Leverage is basically a heist movie, one of the big reasons the show works is because of the found family energy of the cast and characters, that and the social commentary, because one of the main reasons the crew can provide their clients the leverage they need is because the first episode ends with them pretty much being set for life. So on top of the fact that they're already criminals with unusual lives, they can afford to spend all their time helping people and setting marks up in elaborate ways. By the third season, there's been a bit of character development, and the crew is working together almost like a well-oiled machine. There's still things that are all working out, but there's an overall plot point of them being forced to work for a mysterious woman who wants them to essentially take down a corrupt man, and that results in them taking down a dictator. At the beginning of the season, this job pretty much seems a bit out of their league, but by the finale, it comes together beautifully. I won't run through every single episode, but I decided to pick out the ones I think stand out the most for me and briefly explain why before wrapping this all up. The first episode being the season opener, the jailhouse job, because it picks up where the last season ended, with Nate taking the fall for a job in order to make sure everyone else walked away free. He meets a guy in prison played by Aldous Hodge's older brother, Hodge, who plays Hardison. And it turns out he was wrongly convicted and was going to be set up to be killed by the corrupt warden who helped put him in jail. On top of calling out the corruption in our justice system, this episode also serves to help set up the season-long arc. One of the things that I enjoy about the episode is that even though we don't know why every prisoner is in jail, we're obviously meant to have empathy for them, and when the warden gets arrested in front of the inmates, them clapping almost signifies to the audience that they're feeling vindicated and that we should be clapping with them. What follows is the reunion job, which is honestly one of my favorite episodes, mostly for comedy reasons. The hitter, Elliot, was probably the only one of the crew that had a good high school experience, seeing as he was a popular jock, whereas Parker didn't even attend high school at all. It was honestly just funny seeing Nate, Sophie, and Hardison get a bit in their feelings about this high school reunion for a school that none of them went to because of the memories it brought up of their own teen years. This was an important episode plot-wise too, but I enjoyed the stuff relating to the characters the most, which flows nicely into the next episode. I know I said I wasn't going to cover them all, but the first few episodes of this season always hit. The inside job gives a little bit more insight to Parker, and we find out that she has a mentor who was the gentleman thief type named Archie. Because his family was being threatened, Parker decided to jump the gun and help him out without fully realizing the danger she put herself into, which causes the team to have to improvise on the fly in order to help her beat one of the most sophisticated security systems they'd ever encountered. It's a fun episode that changes up the formula and starts off being about rescuing Parker and then coming across a corrupt employee mid-job. Despite the fact that her mentor taught her to be more self-focused for understandable reasons, Parker decides to ultimately prioritize doing the right thing in order to save people's lives rather than escape, which shows off her character development and shows us just how much trust she has in her team, as well as how much they love her, and despite the fact that she's still a bit of a mystery to them sometimes. The found family aspect of the show, like I said, is really on display here, as well as the reason why justice often has to be achieved through criminal means in the context of the show, and sometimes real life. The people that they're up against never play fair, and it's the average citizen that suffers while the rich get richer. So basically, yeah, like I said, real life. Which, fun fact, many of the bad guys in Leverage were based on real people and real corporations, and some of the heists/cons the characters pulled were somewhat replicable, because they had an actual criminal consultant, which got the writers and showrunner some government attention. But anyway, back to the episodes. I'm going to skip ahead a few, though I will give a quick special mention to the Scheherazade job, because it showcases Hardison's musical talent and hints a bit at him being the group's heart, and to the Double Blind job, because it has the pretzel scene, which is a very important one in the Parker-Hardison slow burn romance. I'll also give a special mention to the 3-card Monty job for introducing us to Nate's father and giving us more insight as to why Nate is the way that he is. The next episode I want to talk about, though, is the Rashomon job. I actually saw the original Japanese movie Rashomon in high school with its foreign film club. If you don't know the plot of the movie, it's essentially where the trope of people telling their own versions of events in a crime or after some kind of mishap comes from, each story changing based on the character telling it. In the film, each character, even the dead samurai, has something to protect, whether it's their ego or their status. In the Leverage episode, we're given the opportunity to look back at an attempted theft that all the main characters dealt with in the past before they met each other. I personally love the running gag where Elliot, Hardison, and Parker, in that order, imagine Sophie's British accent more and more inaccurately until we get to Parker's version where it sounded like complete gibberish. It contrasts greatly with how fabulously Sophie presented herself in her fake Duchess persona. Nate tells his story last and gives us, the audience, the most accurate view of events, with one of the most egregious oversights on all the others' parts being their understanding of one of the guys that worked at the museum. Because he served as an obstacle to their goals rather than see him as the awkward, overall nice guy that he was, they all saw him as pushy and a bit aggressive. Perspective is everything, folks. This episode is a bit of a diversion from the season-long storyline, which the episode does lampshade, but the massive nerd in me always loves when a show gives us the opportunity to do a character study, much like the different timeline episodes of Community in Season 3. That being said, I'm going to skip on to the final 2 episodes since the last 2 episodes of each season tend to be two-parters, which wrap things up. Honestly, like I stated earlier, pretty much all of Leverage still feels relevant, but season 3 ends with an election of sorts, which is honestly partly why it felt right to revisit. The season-long villain, don't know what a villain is, Damien Moreau, is revealed to be someone that Elliot used to work for, and Elliot states that the worst thing he's ever done was while working for Damien. Using context clues based on what we've seen from the show and how Damien has operated, and who he's had connections with, this pretty much tells us a lot. From as early as episode 1, we know that Elliot and Nate have a tendency to use the job as a way to seek some kind of redemption, and that is really emphasized here. I like that they never specifically say what Elliot has done, but I've always thought, given the US government's MO, and again the context clues, it involved the death of children. All the members of the team have strong feelings about children when they get involved based on their own experiences, and Elliot especially has a soft spot for the vulnerable ones. Incidentally, in the second to last episode, The Big Bang Job, their other mark connected to Damien does in a way get a chance to do the right thing, which is on brand because the show likes to emphasize the idea that it's never too late to take a step in the right direction. The Big Bang Job ends with Damien having to hide away in San Lorenzo, a small country with a corrupt government that keeps him protected. This is where the election comes in because the team realizes that their best chance of stopping Damien Moreau and getting any kind of justice is to remove his last bit of powerful protection, meaning they need someone else in charge. Elliot's other connection, a general and their first choice, is taken out of the picture after he's thrown in jail, so as always the team has to improvise, and their only remaining viable candidate is a school teacher who no one considers to be a political threat, hence why he was the only one not imprisoned. A plot like this in an American show to me could go horribly wrong, and I personally think they pulled it off for a few reasons. One, the show establishes that the main characters are criminals, and that amongst themselves they constantly check each other with regards to what is the right thing to do, and Sophie and Elliot in particular try to hold Nate accountable when he pushes them too far. They don't work for the US government, and their jobs actually often put them at odds with it. The US tends to interfere in foreign elections for the benefit of the rich and the people in the government, which brings me to the second reason I think this episode still works. It kind of does the opposite. The team's interference gives the country leadership that would put it back in the hands of the people, and they don't rig the votes or the numbers. They just give their candidate some confidence, and in Nate's words, they do run an American-style election, but in this instance, they do so to get the good guys the win. This is honestly at the heart of why Leverage can be a cathartic rewatch when things get rough, because the idea of people who could use their talents for evil actually coming together to use the tactics of the corrupt against them feels more grounded in reality than most violent over-the-top ideas people have when they romanticize the idea of a revolution. There will be some violence realistically, but the main work will be small and behind the scenes, and it isn't going to result in fame. Of course, again, this can largely happen since, as I mentioned earlier, the crew doesn't have to worry about money, and they can be sustained pretty much on the gratitude of the people that know what they've done, and that helps push them forward. So, to wrap things up, Leverage is one of my favorite shows to rewatch. If you didn't understand why before, I think it's pretty apparent what sparked me to talk about it again now. And once I finish, I'm going to try to watch the reboot since I've heard good things. If you've watched Leverage before, do you have a favorite episode or season? Season 4, like I said, is also top tier to me, so I am curious. If you've never watched Leverage, do it now. Other than that, leave a like if you liked, subscribe for Murder Day Rambling, and as always, have a good one.